Okay, and now it is my pleasure to introduce Jeremy Shepard, President of the Cultured Pearl Association of America, President of Pearl Paradise, founder of Pearl Guide. Brainchild behind Pearls is one. There's probably so much more. Those are the titles that he's coming with right now. And he is going to present many cool things today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'd like to start first by thanking Sarah for putting this together. She really done herself every year. It's just amazing, and I'm so honored to be here with you guys today. And it's only my second time to Pearls by the Bay, but last year was such an amazing experience. I know I'm going to be back every year, and many of us have gotten together almost every year for years, and to see all these familiar faces here, it's really amazing. Isano and I love it, and we're very grateful to you, Sarah. Thank you so much. So today I'm really going to talk about where the industry is today, and I thought this topic would be appropriate because over the last few years we've seen some really substantial changes in so many different aspects of the industry. When COVID hit a few years ago, everything sort of changed. Everything is interconnected in the pearl industry. Although we know China was locked down and China is the primary producer, of course, of freshwater pearls, it locked down almost the entire industry for different reasons. For example, Tahitian pearls. You think of Tahitian pearls, Tahiti, it's way out in the Pacific. How would they be affected by COVID? Well, one of the things people might not know is that the pearl grafters that are responsible for growing the pearls or inserting the nucleus into the oysters, almost all of them come from Tahiti. I'm sorry, they come from China. And so when the pandemic hit, the Chinese grafters had just got home. They go home for the the Chinese New Year, beginning of the year. And then the pandemic hit, and suddenly none of them go back to Tahiti. So in Tahiti, we've got people scrambling there. What do you do? Well, the government, stepped in. They forced a lower production quota on farms, etc. But the grafters are basically the bedrock of the industry, because without grafters, you really can't grow any pearls. So Tahitians started learning how to graft pearls. They started using locals to graft pearls, which, don't get me wrong, it's fantastic. It's great for their future. But at the same time, the experience and the skill of the grafters is really what determines the quality of any given harvest. So from about 2000 on, we knew that Tahitian pearls, the quantity and the quality, probably the quality, was going to be going down. And so about 2023 is when things started coming back and the market started picking up again. We saw some drops in prices during COVID because dealers weren't producing as much, people weren't buying as much, all the stores are closed, jewelry stores were closed, so prices started dropping. But then things started turning, and they started turning pretty dramatically in about 2023. So about early last year, we started seeing things turn pretty dramatically. Production had fallen and prices had started going up. So they started going up in, say, January, February, March. We saw a pretty steady increase in pricing until the summer. Last summer, everything changed. So last summer, something happened in China. Okay? And in our industry, when something happens in China, it affects everything. It affects everything. Well, there's an influencer in China. And I'm sure you've all heard of influencers, your Instagram influencers, your TikTok influencers. They may be influencers here, but they are influencers in China, right? An actress, very famous actress by the name of Mimi. She's known for her film Flowers of War. back in 2011. So she's been an influencer in China for quite a little while. She came out with a new movie, and this new movie, what was the name of the movie? Lost in the Stars. Okay, she decided to go out on a social media blitz to promote her new movie, Lost in the Stars, and she loves pearls. She wears pearls in most of her social media photos, but she decided to specifically wear pearls, and most specifically Tahitian pearls, in 30 days of 30 selfies to promote her film. So she goes on this 30-day tour, and suddenly Tahitian pearls completely blow up. And when I say completely blow up, I mean like, wow, completely blow up. Okay. So this is happening as we're getting ready to go to the Hong Kong show that Hisano and I go to every September. You know, we go to the Hong Kong show in September because we've got to buy pearls for the holidays, right? And at the Hong Kong show, all of the pearl producers come into one place, pearl producers, pearl processors, and it's their chance to really sell to the entire international market. Well, Hisano and I have also started doing some live streaming. And we were planning on doing some live streaming at this show, and we had communicated with some of our friends from Tahiti, and one of our friends in particular is a large broker in Tahiti. He comes to Hong Kong at every show and brings a whole lot of pearls. So the weeks leading up to it, we were communicating with him, talking about whether he was going to join us in the live streams, how he was going to prepare all these pearls. We're going to meet him at the show, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we get to Hong Kong, and we meet with him at the Mira Hotel, and the first thing he says is, "Jeremy, I'm so sorry, they're all gone." Like, what do you mean they're all gone, right? He says, no, you don't understand. It's gone. The show hasn't started yet, but it's gone. He said 3 buyers came and bought 90% of my pearls before the show has even started. And he said, my phone's ringing off the hook right now, and I can't, I don't have anything else to sell them. I said, I'm sorry, but all I have are my, cherry pick special pearls that, he wants $1,000 a pearl, $5,000 a pearl, these super special pearls. So that's all I've got left of the showcase pieces. Everything else is gone. So we clearly had to figure out something else to do, right? Well, the next day, we went to the show. The show started, and it was a zoo. I mean, you were probably there, Betty. Yes, you were there, right?
We were all there. We think, oh my God.
Oh my God. We walk into the show, and we couldn't even get to these booths. They were just surrounded by groups of people, just like crowded shoulder to shoulder. And if you've ever been into any market in mainland China, it's a battle if you're buying anything. But this was a true battle. The booths were being mobbed and just thronged. And I've been doing this for about 25 years, and I'd never seen anything like this before. So Hisano and I are just kind of walking around the show going, oh boy, what do we do? What do we do? Can we buy anything? The first day, within an hour, there were booths that just closed. Everything was gone. They sold everything in the first hour. We met with some of our friends and the people we've been working with for many years, and they all basically said the same thing. He said, hey, just go do something else. There's no point. Don't try to buy anything here, but don't worry, Jeremy. We'll hold some pearls for you. We know what's going on here, and we'll take care of you. So we took their word for it, and thankfully, after the show, they came through. But there was really nothing we could do. There were no pearls for sale. I shouldn't say that. There were pearls for sale, but yeah. There were people taking their price list and going, okay, here's an extra zero. Here's the one. They were telling me this, and I'm looking at their prices going, hey, we just saw you in March. These pearls were $100 a piece. Now they're $1,100 or $1,000. We added a zero, we added a one, and they're selling, right? They're selling them, and not only are they selling them, but people are fighting over them. Right? We saw Akoya pearls that we typically go there and source a lot of Akoya pearls, freshwater pearls, Tahitian pearls, etc. We couldn't find any Akoya pearls for not only a purchasable price, we couldn't find Akoya pearls for even the price we sell them for.
Yeah.
And so there was really nothing we could do. We just decided to basically enjoy the show. Like most of the other Western buyers did, because I would say 99% at least were from mainland China. They were all capitalizing on this flash trend and meaning. So to give you an idea of how crazy it went, there was one booth in particular. Okay, one booth in particular had these gorgeous strands of Tahitian pearls. They're multicolored Tahitians, right? And for those of you who match strands, put strands together, you can buy loose lots of exotic colored Tahitian pearls and make some really gorgeous strands. For they've marked up a little bit for a few $1,000s, something really clean, maybe $5,000 or $6,000 in the 9 to 10, 9 to 11 millimeter range. One dealer had an entire case of 9 to 11s and 10 to 12s and some just slightly bigger, all with these certificates, which is a big thing in China, not a big thing in the US, but definitely a big thing in China. And they were asking nearly $50,000 per strand for the 9 to 11 millimeter pearls. Okay, if we could sell one strand for $50,000, well, we take the rest of the month off. Okay. The crazy thing is this was wholesale. They were selling these strands to be resold in the Chinese market, and not just resold in the Chinese market. They were almost all going to live stream selling in the Chinese market, which is pretty much what has capitalized the market.
Question from a non-jeweler: is a strand 16 inches?
Typically, a strand is 16 inches before a clasp is put on. So these are 16-inch strands.
Thank you.
And
I have a few strands I would have sold.
you know what? Don't think that didn't cross my mind, Ruth. Some and I were talking about this, that if this trend continues, maybe we should just get out of the pearl business in the U.S., just bring our entire vault over to the next show. Just take our retail price, put an extra zero on the end of it, and just be done with it, right? So the 10 to 12 millimeter strands, I looked at one strand, $82,000. $82,000. And these are prices we've seen. Well, no, I say we, I'm not really referring to me. Probably Betty Sue has seen those prices. But we're talking 25, 30, 40 years ago when pearls were somewhat new out of Tahiti, and Salvador Asael brought the first strands back, and they were selling in the $100,000 range. That's what we saw. Something I thought I would never ever see again in my life. And I'll tell you, the farmers who were there, salivating. My friend Alexander Collins, after the show, he's like, I'm buying a new boat, I'm putting some lines, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. It's like they bought everything, and the prices they were offering me were just crazy. And they expected me to negotiate, so they went higher. Another of my friends, Louis Viard from Poe, said while he was at the show, he said a group of buyers had already arrived in Papaete and were buying out everything they could get in Papaete. His office had called him, and he had sold 8 to 10 millimeter CD circle loose pearls for $10 a pearl. Okay, now it may sound cheap, but we're talking CD circles. This is the sort of thing that you would rarely see in like a fine jewelry store. They're not really considered jewelry grade. And at $10 a pearl for a strand that takes 43 pearls on average from 9 to 10 millimeter, that's $430 before the stringing, before the matching, for a strand that typically you could buy for $50 to $100 at one of these shows if you're dealing in like what we consider like a beading grade or a low grade pearl. So he was happy. He had sold them for $10. He was like laughing because he's like, not only you get $10. And they said, well, does that include tax? He's like, no. I said, and then they paid the tax on top of that. So wow, Tahitian pearls went absolutely bonkers in September. On the last day of the show, okay, everything kind of went absolutely nuts because Robert Wan has a big auction after the September show. And the show is broken up into two sides. We've got a show at Asia World Expo, which is the exhibition center at the airport, and then Wan Chai, which is the exhibition center in the city. So for the first few days, the show at the airport is really where, you know, buyers that produce their own jewelry, drill their own pearls, that sort of thing, and make their own jewelry, they buy because it's mostly loose pearls. It's a very wholesale sort of show. Wan Chai is a little bit more on the high end. It's got the brands, a lot of finished jewelry. So we always go to the Asia World Expo show. That's where we do most of our business. And the auctions, the Paspaley auctions, the Robert Wan auctions, they start at the Wan Chai show. So they start immediately after the Asia World Expo. And so buyers fly in just for those auctions, and people stay after the Asia World Expo to attend the Robert Wan show. I mean, this is the opportunity for wholesalers and you know, larger retailers to buy large lots of pearls from Robert Wan. Well, on the last day of the show, there was a little rumble going on, I'd say, in the crowds. The entire auction canceled. The entire auction was canceled. One buyer had gotten to Robert Wan prior to the auction and offered him an offer he couldn't refuse for the entire thing. And for Robert Wan, someone who has been, you know, struggling, especially during the pandemic with the pearl prices going down, he's been having a difficult time. His company has been for a number of years. This was like a miracle for him. And so we can't fault him for doing that. I mean, a lot of people were pretty upset, but at the same time, the buyers who had come out realized what was even going to happen at the auction after seeing what was happening at the show. Were we really going to be able to buy anything at the auction? Probably not anyway. So the entire auction was canceled. So Tahitian pearls, you know, they still started going up just for a short period after that. You know, November, right before November, we saw the peak, and then they started dropping a little bit, okay? And prices since then have pretty much stabilized. And I say stabilized, don't get me wrong, they're higher than what they were a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, by far. But, you know, you can now buy pearls at some sort of a reasonable level and resell them, at least in our market, in the US market. But why? What happened, right? Well, even today, most of those pearls purchased in Hong Kong at the show, they're still in Hong Kong. They're still in Hong Kong. So mainland China has this crazy tax on Tahitian pearls, 40%. And, you know, not all pearl buyers, you know, like to follow exactly the letter of the law when they're buying pearls from those shows and bringing them over. And, you know, it's not been a secret. It's been kind of an open secret for years, in that a lot of buyers that come to the Hong Kong show will fill their bags and they will bring them over, or they will go through one of the brokers, one particular broker, who also organizes a lot of the auctions in Hong Kong. Well, the first shipment leaving this show, apparently they were marked as $1 a pearl. Or another shipment was marked as white South Sea pearls, which have a completely different, I believe that tax rate is 10% versus 40%. And suddenly the entire thing was locked down. All the pearls are now stuck in Hong Kong. Okay. So imagine millions and millions of dollars of Tahitian pearls being purchased at the Hong Kong show. Everybody's excited to bring them back over to mainland China to sell them, and then they're still there. And why are they still there? The prices peaked. They went down. So imagine if you purchased a pearl for $100 and you paid a really big premium because you were buying it at the show and fighting with a bunch of people for it, when now the actual market price of that pearl is $25, and you paid $100, and the government wants $40 to get it out of customs. What do you do? What do you do? So at this point, I still don't know what's going to happen there. The person who was the main person in importing these pearls into China The son of the owner of the big Hong Kong company that organizes those auctions is sitting in a Chinese jail right now.
Oh,
And so we really don't know what's going to happen to them. But what has happened in the market is that the Chinese have kind of frozen. They're not really buying right now, even though there's demand there. The buying has really, really slowed down. So, and I just threw some extra pictures here, which I thought, if you haven't been to Tahiti and seen a Tahitian pearl farm, this is one of my favorite pictures I shot at Mr. Paul Yu's farm on Takaroa of people cleaning some Tahitian pearl shells. Anyway. And some of these special pearls. These are some beautiful, beautiful pearls. Some Keishi in here and a bead nucleator. Are these all Keishi? They're all Keishi, right? They were all Keishi. These are some of the Tahitian pearls from Isano's personal collection. So that was Tahitian pearls. South Sea pearls. Well, the South Sea pearl auction happens basically at the same time as the Rock One auction. Right after Asia World Expo in Wan Chai, Pass Bailey has their big annual auction. I think more than one auction, but the one in September is really big because this is when everybody's getting ready for Christmas. And we heard through the vendors that Pass Bailey had invited more than 60 mainland Chinese buyers to the Pass Bailey auction. So my friends, the pearl houses on the East Coast, the ones who've got all these programs to fill and everything, they were just like, I didn't even know if we're even going to show up. A couple of my friends did show up, and they told me it's basically the same sort of madhouse. Auction prices were 2 to 2.5 times over floor. And what I mean by floor is the price that the producers are willing to accept for their pearls. So you've got a lot of, say, 500 pearls, and they're willing to accept $100 per pearl. They were getting as much as $250 per pearl. Now, the reason that doesn't work for most buyers in the U.S. is because we all have programs. And what I mean by that is wholesale buyers will be working with jewelry stores, or not just jewelry stores, but maybe large stores, department stores, etc. And you have to buy to fill these programs. And for us, this means buying to fill the needs that we have on our own retail websites and wholesale, and then the wholesale that we do. Typically, these prices are decided and they're negotiated in advance, and then you go and you buy the pearls. So South Sea pearls basically followed Tahitian pearls, and really almost nobody could buy in a big way at the September show. So the September show really kind of threw everybody on their head, especially here in the U.S., because for our market, our customers, they know what pearls are supposed to cost. They've been seeing pearl advertisements, seeing pearls for sale for years. Maybe a little bit of a price increase is acceptable, but a 200, 300, 400% price increase? Not really. So a lot of dealers were talking about just ending it right there and selling out of everything, retiring, not buying again, just ending all their programs, only dealing in one category or another. They thought it was basically over for the U.S. market. There was nothing they could do about it. But things, of course, started to change. Well, I shouldn't say it right away, because the Otori auction happened in October. And the Otori auction was virtual. Make this play. Show you what I mean by that. So since the pandemic, things sort of changed in our industry. In the past, we would have to fly to Japan, to Hong Kong, French Polynesia, wherever the auctions were being held, to examine all these lots one at a time to determine what sort of price we would bid for these lots. This is a typical tender sheet, and what you're looking at there right is A001. We know how many pearls are in the lot and the approximate size based on the monet weight. So basically, we make a bid a bid for what we're willing to pay for the entire lot, which is typically a price per momaine, as we put it. Okay, and in a 9 to 11 millimeter lot, you know what you're looking at about a half a momaine per pearl. One momaine, by the way, is 3.75 grams. One con, 3.75 kilograms. So the Ettore auction had lots ranging from about 8 millimeters to about 18 millimeters. Notable winning bids: one lot of 9 to 11 millimeter round white A grade went for $2,099 per momaine.
Wow.
Okay. Just a few months prior, most A grade 9 to 11 millimeter lots were going for the $600 to about $800. And this isn't even an in-person auction. This isn't a virtual auction. So people are buying based on the video. So, and a 12 to 13 millimeter A grade gem white lot. I don't mean gem. I mean gem white, which is a color description. Sold for $1,476 per pearl. So imagine just a single 12 millimeter pearl costing several $1,000s, and having to buy an entire bag of those pearls when you're buying a lot. And you know, if you're a retail buyer, you may think, well, 12 millimeter A grade at that price, that's okay. But no. What they call A grade and what the buyers call A grade, there's always a mix there, which is why it's so important to examine these lots, because you know everything is subjective. So to a farmer, every pearl should be an A grade, right? and so, and sorry to any farmers in the room here, but you know what I'm referring to, right? But of course, you know, they're your babies, and like, well, you know, if you look at it from this side, it's an A grade. You know, sort of the blemishes are all kind of on the same side. It's a little set clean, so you really have to work with that when you're buying these lots. So if you're buying a 12 millimeter lot and you're paying, you know, a few $1,000s per pearl, you may have 25 to 50% of those pearls that can be used in like a perfectly clean round pendant or earring or ring, and then other pearls may need to go into strands or into tin cups or something like that, so they can be drilled completely through. So not every pearl in that lot has the same value. A doesn't really mean what it should be. And on top of that, they also have gem, top gem, and those sorts of things in their lots as well. So, but the February 2024 auctions, prices had fallen by about 30%. So prices have started to come back down in South Seas as well, sort of for the same reason, in that, well, really the Chinese buyers are scared to death right now. They're just not buying the way they were all the way up until September. So prices have started to stabilize again. And this is lot 184. Just to kind of show you what I was really talking about, and you can see the variance in these lots. This lot is described as the shape button to high button. It's a grade B/C1, size 9 to 17 millimeter, pink, light pink, white, and silver. And so it can be quite challenging to really determine the value of these things. But as you can see, even in this lot where they're all pretty much supposed to be the same, you'll see a lot of them with blemishes. A lot of them are a little bit cleaner. Some of them have a little bit better luster. But yeah, this is really the way we buy pearls at auction now. So I thought you guys might enjoy actually just saying this. When the auction tender sheets come out, we now get videos with every one of these lots. See, this is video or lot 184, so there's hundreds of these videos. And really, you've got to watch the entire video, examine every one of the pearls, and really make the decision to figure out what the value should be, because a lot of times the floor prices aren't disclosed. And when the floor prices aren't disclosed, you know, a couple of different things can happen, especially if you've got a lot of buyers coming from overseas or in China that are first-time buyers at auctions. They have no idea what they're supposed to pay for these things. This is where you can get floor prices 2 to 3 times over where they would normally be, because they may look at it and say, wow, I could sell this for this price. Well, that's what they bid for it. And that pushes the prices out through the stratosphere. Just another cool picture.
Yeah.
This is a shot I took in the Philippines. Hisano and I spent a couple of weeks at a South Sea Pearl Farm, and we had the opportunity to dive one of the pearl lines. And so this is a jewel mare pearl line. We dove from one end of the pearl line to the other end of the pearl line, and we got to see all the divers doing what Douglas was just talking about a little bit ago, and that's flipping the lines so that the pearls grow more round.
Jewel mare, they produce exactly the same pearls as the Tahitian pearls.
No, they produce golden South Sea pearls.
So they don't produce pearl from like the same one, gray and no, really?
No, just black, just golden. Just golden.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, they're one of the largest golden South Sea producers in the world.
Yeah.
They use the Pinctada Maxima gold lift shell,
Uh-huh.
and they are the only producer there that has their own hatchery, and they actually selectively breed their shells to get really golden pearls. So they don't use any black lift shells there.
The owner studied in the Tuamotu.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. In fact, that's where Mr. Brandalek started.
Right.
He had a partner in the Tuamotus, and that didn't work out very well for him. And then he moved over to the Philippines in the 1970s and started the South Sea Pearl Farm there.
Right.
And he's still running the farm there with his son Jack right now.
Yeah, okay.
And this is one of my favorite pictures under the water there. Hisano over here. So, Hisano is also a diver, and we got to dive this together, which was pretty fantastic. And here are some of the creme de la creme white South Seas available. In fact, most of these pearls here actually came from Burma. Yeah. So that's South Seas. And you would think, does it stop there? No. There's more. Okay. Akoyas as well. Right? So what has happened with Akoyas? It's a completely different issue. So you guys can all read this, right? So in 2019, we got some communications from our friends in Japan. And our friend Takashi, and almost every year he calls us up, sends us an email or whatever, tells us about how prices are going to be going up because of X, Y, or Z. And, it's just what all of our vendors have always done. They're kind of leading into the negotiations for the next year, right? Well, this year was a little bit different. In 2019, he said, hey, we've got sort of an emergency happening in Japan right now. So the shells are all dying. Okay? They're just dying, and nobody knows why. Said they don't know if it's because of global warming. They don't know if it has to do with a virus. But the mortality rates on these shells were as high as 70%. They had interviewed 122 pearl farmers in the Mie prefecture alone. And across the board, at least 50% of their shells had died. And nobody knew why. And of course, Akoya pearls have a 2-year grow out, right? For the shells. So if you got baby shells that are dying in 2019, well, that tells you what's going to happen in 2021, right? Because, and also it wasn't just the baby shells that were dying. There were also grafted shells that were dying. They weren't dying in the same numbers, but we're talking 20 to 30% of even the grafted shells were also dying. So that's pretty scary. It's pretty scary for the farmers. It's pretty scary for us in the industry because it's not like what's happening today. It's what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So this is a healthy shell. This is what one of the dying shells looks like, right? Initially, they really had no idea what was killing the shells, but then they figured it out. And they figured it out about 2021. It was called a burnavirus. And if you're not familiar with a burnavirus, and I wasn't really familiar with burnavirus either. I had to look it up in Wikipedia, right? But basically, it's a virus that affects aquatic animals. It affects shellfish. It affects the way their shell grows, their mantle grows the shell. Basically, overall, it makes them a lot less healthy. And so they're not as able to produce pearls. Well, historically in Japan, pearl farmers use 10 different shells. And, when I say 10 different shells, it's like 10 different like hybridizations, if you will, of the exact same Pinctada martense. And these shells, some of them are better for the saibo, and this is saibo, the lip that's cut out of a donor shell to be placed in the pearl sac with one of the beads. Some shells are better for the saibo selection. Some shells are better for, excuse me, for hosting the shell or hosting the pearl. So they tried all sorts of things to try to counteract what was happening there. They started hybridizing more shells. They came up to about 30 different shells. And some would be okay, but then the next year they wouldn't. This problem persisted. It wasn't just 2019. They had the same problem in 2020, the same problem in 2021, the same problem in 2022, the same problem in 2023. The same problem is happening right now. So not only the farmers started trying different shells, but they've also tried moving different locations. They've tried, well, the numbers route with farmers, excuse me, I got some water here, with farmers grafting more shells. Say, for example, typically you graft 100 shells. Now they're grafting 150 shells because they know they're all going to die. So to date, there is no cure, and all we can do is hope and pray to the mollusk gods that eventually this will pass. But what has that done to the market? Okay. What has it done to the market? Well, like I said, in 2019 is when the die-off started. Well, in 2021, we were still sort of in the throes of the pandemic. And during the pandemic, prices were just crashing in all pearl varieties because people weren't buying pearls because all the jewelry stores were closed. There was no market for it. Well, this kind of shows you what happened. Okay? In 2020, now remember, the die-off started in 2019. So in 2020, they were still using shells that were cultured in 2018. So there may have been a little bit of a drop-off because some of the grafted shells died as well, but not like we started to see in 2021. Pandemic is the only reason this line didn't start going the other way in 2021. Prices were decreasing across the board, and not only were prices decreasing across the board, but a lot of wholesalers had a lot of inventory that they had been sitting on for a couple of years, and they needed to move that inventory in order to buy new raw materials. But come 2022, this is when we saw prices start to just go stratosphere. 47.4% increase in the first year of them coming back alone for year over year. Excuse me. And you can see the production started dropping. 2020, 3,306.5 con. One con is 3.75 kilograms. Gives you an idea of how much how many pearls were being produced. Dropped to 2,600. 2022 down to 2,500, and the value started increasing. And this is the Mome value at auction. So the way Akoya pearls are sold in Japan is they're harvested, and I'll actually show you some pictures of this in a moment. They are sold at something called Nyusatsu, Hamage Nyusatsu. The Nyusatsu is basically an auction, and every year after the harvest, the Nyusatsu season starts. And that's basically what determines the market price for pearls going forward. A Nyusatsu happens from about January, late December until about March. In fact, this year's Nyusatsu just ended. And we're down all the way up to 11,000 for this year. Okay? Another 50% increase after a 47% increase, after a 67% increase. And yay, the increase is going down a little bit. But still, another 51% increase in 2024. That means since 2021, raw material prices have increased by 3.72x. Okay? And this is raw material prices. So these are the pearls that go to the processors in Kobe and other parts of Japan. And not only are the prices, raw material prices going through the roof, but the demand has gone through the roof as well. So even at these prices, it's almost impossible to buy enough pearls to fill any programs. And people are more or less able to charge what they want, and a lot of them do, especially with new buyers. Now is the time to have relationships. It's more important than it has ever been in this industry, because the relationships are what is sustaining companies like ours. I'm sure you as well, Betty. The relationships with these processors and producers for other types of pearls who are willing to sell to us, knowing we'd have to basically shut down our entire business because we can't go back and say, hey, everything is now 500% more than it was last year. Bye. We're like, bye, right? So, so 3.72x, which is pretty crazy. And by the way, this is the auction price that just ended in March. It's now May. So none of you have seen these pearls yet. Okay? You've probably seen Akoya prices going crazy. You're still looking at this. All right? By this time next year, prices will have to increase at least by another 50%, which is kind of crazy. So, some cool photos. This is Mikimoto's experimental farm that I got to visit. This is, showing this because you can see there's a bit of a difference in the way pearls are grown. Japan, these are the long rafts. You can see there's ropes hanging off there. They've all got Akoya shells and baskets, whereas the photo that I showed you in Fresh Polynesia and the photo you saw in Tahiti, there's these long lines in the middle of these more open, bays and oceans. Japan is a little bit tighter, if you will. A lot of these more protected areas, the shells are really delicate, but they're all kind of grouped together in these areas of Japan too, which is part of the reason why they suffer from these things. Because all the shells are in the same area, the Ehime, the Mie areas. But it's not just because of that, because we've got farms all the way down in Kyushu as well, and even shells all the way down in Kyushu, which is the southernmost part of Japan. This is the central part of Japan, and as you guys know, Japan's really long, really skinny. Well, there's shells dying all the way down on the southernmost tip, as well as the central part of Japan. So, by the way, this is what fresh harvest pearls actually look like, Akoya pearls. Most of you are probably familiar with like white, shiny Akoya pearls. That's what most people think of when they think about Akoya pearls, because for the first, up until just a few years ago, so almost the entire duration of the Akoya pearl industry, the Japanese have been very, very careful about putting out perfectly white, perfectly round pearls. So when you harvest pearls like this yellow one here, these golden ones, and you'll see some other colors in a moment as well, historically they've always been bleached to get very, very white. But this is freaking beautiful, right?
Yes.
And by the way, this pearl here was over 11 millimeters. So that was Mikimoto's experimental farm, and my hand was a little dry that day. So at auction, though, when they go to Newsatsu, they're separated. They're separated by quality. They're separated by size, and this is more what you'd be accustomed to seeing. And this is, of course, a very high quality, perfectly white, great orient, great luster, great color lot. And this is after they go from auction, they go to these processors, where they're bleached. They go through a process called Maya Shori, which is basically a universal process. Maya Shori literally means pre-treatment. But pre-treatment sort of blends into other types of treatments as well, and every processor has their own secret method of getting the luster out of the pearl, the color out, turning them white. And then after they've been processed, they are matched into strands. And it is a crazy tedious process. I love matching Tahitian pearls. I love making strands. Compared to this, It's pretty easy. Hisano can do this, but So the best of the best in the whites, basically how good they can get. But just so you know, this particular set was made from 2 strands that I only got 4 of from one processor. He only had 4 strands at this grade out of everything that he processed. So this is really, really, really special. So not all Akoya pearls are just those perfect round beads though, right? There are different colors. There's also keishis. There's all sorts of crazy, beautiful pearls coming out now. And these other types of pearls that are coming out of Japan are actually somewhat new. And I say they're somewhat new because, well, the keishis aren't that new, but like blues are new, the golds are new, the silvers and pistachios are new. Because when they were produced before, the Japanese, throw them back in the water. No, we didn't do that. We didn't grow that. They don't look like this. They're not ours. But about a decade ago, some natural blue Akoya pearls snuck into the market. And they snuck into the market via China. Because China was producing Akoya pearls as well. And some of those blue pearls, they were just so gorgeous and so amazing. And I ended up bringing some back to the U.S. and people absolutely loved them. And then they hit the Tucson show. And then they made their way into Modern Jeweler magazine. And suddenly everybody wants these other cool pearls. And now we get natural colors coming out of Japan too. Here's some keishis. Aren't they gorgeous? Not only are they gorgeous, but they're so tiny you can't even drill them with a regular pearl drill. They have to be drilled by hand with a bow and a spike. And these are some of those natural blues that I was talking about. Wow. Completely natural color. Can you believe they used to hide these? You couldn't even bleach these things, right? These were pearls that would be peeled. They'd take the nacre and they'd sell the nacre to like makeup companies and companies that would do like pearl supplements, things like that. They didn't want anybody to know that something like this came out of the oyster because they weren't white, they weren't perfect. But they are so beautiful. So beautiful. And this is what the gold's can do. It almost looks like a golden South Sea pearl, right? They're 6 millimeter. Really, really tiny. And so beautiful. And the Baroques. So, that's Akoya. What about freshwater pearls? Well, I've only got a limited amount of time today, and I'd love to talk all about these Kasumi pearls because I was just introduced to Kasumi pearls last month by Sarah. We had an amazing trip with Kasumi Gaura. And I'm actually wearing one today. Kasumi Gaura pearls. So I don't know much about these yet. I'm just starting to learn. But I am so in love. But that's aside. The big market is, of course, China. That's where the freshwater pearls come from in a big sense. Lake Kasumi Gaura has one pearl farmer. Yoneguchi-san is the only guy. And when I say the only guy, I don't mean whatever farm and he's the only farm that operates. No, he's a one-man show.
Wow.
Everything. Nothing else. Just crafting, the throw out, the harvesting. He's got nobody else there. Just him. And how old is he, Sarah?
We don't know.
Nobody's
When he told me his age 15, 20 years ago, I was floored. And I still don't remember what age he is, and I'm too ashamed to ask.
Yeah, he's got a great skin routine, I'll tell you. But anyway, in China, okay, this is what a typical pearl farm looks like in China. And a pretty typical pearl farm. If you are to drive through Zhejiang province, Fuji, you'll see these sort of like ponds just scattered all over the countryside. And they're farming freshwater pearls. And you may think, well, this farmer has a lot of pearls, but this is a few kilos of pearls. And out of that entire harvest, he might not even get enough round pearls to make one perfectly round necklace. Okay, most of them are very baroque and not that fine, but they sell them the way they would sell wheat or rice. They sell them to bigger companies that buy from all these other farms. They bring them all into one processing factory, and then they process them by, shape, color, size, etc. And you can see they're very ingenious. See those green things floating in the water? They're bottles. They're like plastic bottles. And there must be a massive market for these in China because all farms have these same bottles. I don't know what they're drinking. I've never seen anybody drinking out of these bottles, but all farms their float lines are held up by these bottles. So what's happening in the market in China? Well, prices have been kind of crazy, kind of fluctuating. And it's hard to really say what's happening across the board because everybody always kind of gives you a different story. And while we were in this show in September of last year, and talking to some dealers that had some pearls for sale, some of the prices they were asking for their pearls, I mean, clearly they were trying to follow what was happening with Tahitians. $400 or $500 for 7 to 8 millimeter year-round freshwater pearls are, simply not sustainable. But what has been happening is that the traditional freshwater pearls are largely being replaced. And when I say traditional freshwater pearls, what I'm really referring to are tissue wrap. And so there's the traditional freshwater pearls, the way they're grown is they take a mussel, the Hyraxis comini typically, and they open it up, and it's got two valves and the two sides of the shell. And they make a little incision in the mantle, and in fact, a lot of little incisions, typically up to 16 incisions on each side of the valves, to up to 32 pearls. Back when they were using Cristaria plicata, they would do up to 50, 25 on either side. Yeah, it's typically in the Hyraxis comini about 32, so 16 on either side. And they insert a small piece of donor tissue. When I showed you the Akoya shell and I pointed out the tissue that I call the saibon, they do the same thing with freshwaters. They take a little piece of tissue from a donor shell, they insert it into those incisions in the mantle. And then they put the shell back in the water, and then that mantle tissue acts sort of like a catalyst to initiate the growth of a pearl. But that's also why freshwater pearls are rarely ever round, because they don't have bead. They've got that little tissue starting it, which really doesn't give anything to the shape of the pearl. And so truly round freshwater pearls used to be like 1/10 of 1%, not even 1%, like 1 in thousands and thousands of pearls just to get one truly round freshwater pearls. So you've probably seen round freshwater pearls, like true round freshwater pearls, but it's because just a few years ago, production was up to 1,500 metric tons. And by the way, Kasumi, how many tons did they produce? He produced. To give you an idea, what was it, like 5 kilos?
Yeah.
Maybe about 5 kilos of pearls. 5 kilos, 1,500 metric tons. I know I'm speaking metric, but you can tell that's a big difference. Right? So, what's happening in China right now are beaded pearls. By and large, it's beaded pearls. There are pearls are sold by weight. When you put a bead inside of a pearl, it grows larger. And what we're seeing are two new types of pearls. The first one, which I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with, they're referred to as Edisons, they're referred to as Ming pearls, they're referred to as Ikecho pearls. We've got Grace Pearl started out with the Edisons, and another company started out with the Mings. Now they're all just basically commingled. Mostly they're referred to as Edison pearls in China now. And these pearls grow large. We're talking 14 millimeter, 15 millimeter, 16, all the way up to 20 millimeters. And they are deep, deep, deep dark colors, often with amazing, amazing luster. So beautiful, but not everybody can pull them off. Not everybody can wear a 16 millimeter Edison strand. Not everybody here can, I know. But if you're a pearl lover, you can pull off a strand like that. But most people, when they want to get their first strand of pearls, they're looking for something that is more conservative, more classic, and that's your 7 millimeter, 8 millimeter, 9 millimeter white round pearls, right? And then something else, these tiny, tiny nucleated pearls. And this is the newest thing. And we started seeing these a couple of years ago in China, and they've progressively gotten better and better. The first time we saw them a couple of years ago, they still have these little telltale tails to them. Telltale tails, yeah, that works. Little tails on them, they'd be a little bit off round, but these were these new beaded ones that were coming out of China. They've now become, well, I'll show you in a minute, actually a problem. So these are Edison's. All right, the one on the top is a 15 millimeter pearl. Okay. And these are, I believe, at least we're told, natural colors. Okay. Now I'm sure they go through some treatments. Today, these days, pearls, unless you're talking Kasumi pearls, unless you're talking pearls from Tahiti, Australian pearls from Australia that haven't passed through Japan. Otherwise, they're pretty much going to have gone through some sort of treatment, whether it be a Maya shorting treatment, a luster treatment, or a color treatment. But these are pearl colors that I have personally seen come out of the shell at a pearl farm. So I know that they do actually produce these colors. And as you can see, they're round, they're lustrous, they're absolutely beautiful. Maybe not quite as beautiful as this Kasumi.
Not quite.
This one's special. But in their own way, they're absolutely gorgeous. And they're growing as large as 20 millimeters. And some specimens can even be larger than that. When Chinese do something, they want to do it really, really big. The bigger they are, the more money that we can get from them. What happens when they're like, get to these Wilma Flintstone style pearls again, it's created a little bit of a problem. This has created a little bit of a problem for us because so many farmers have migrated their farms over to these beaded pearls because they just get more money for them. And in fact, when these first hit the market, when the Grace Pearl Company first offered them, they offered them at auction, and they invited all our buyers over to mainland China, to Tuji, for this auction, and they sent the invitation, I think, in the first week of December. It was going to be the first week of January. So I don't know who made it from the U.S., but there was no way I was getting on a plane right after Christmas on New Year's to do it. And they were selling them for $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 per strand. That being said, they didn't actually create a market for it first. And so the pearls that did hit the market, those poor souls that did buy those first pearls at $20,000, $25,000 a strand, well, now they're available for $1,000, $2,000, some really high-end specimens for maybe $3,000 a strand. So it's dropped precipitously. But it's been pretty steady, I would say, for the last couple of years. And they are starting to catch on. The wife of the president, I believe it was in China, or then what was wife of the president, wore a strand of these new pearls, and that anytime an influencer, wears something or promotes something, suddenly there's this sort of mad rush for that type of pearl, which is what we saw in Hong Kong in September. So the other type of pearl, actually, I'll show you these as well. These are white versions of Edison's, and I'll tell you, when you see some white ones that have that intense metallic color, the metallic luster, it's like little mirror balls. So I'm quite particular to these pearls. I actually love these. Very difficult to find with full luster all the way around. Typically, you'll have a side that looks like this, and then a side that kind of looks like that calcite pearl that Douglas was showing in his presentation, where it just kind of like loses all luster. But when it's set face up, it's really amazing. And the luster seems to hold. And I say that because we've seen this luster come out rarely, but it still does come out for a number of years. And I've given Hisano pearls, well, not as much anymore, but when we first started dating, when they still impressed her all the time, I gave them. And a lot of metallic pearls. Her metallic pearls are still just as metallic today as they were the day I gave those. So. But what has really started to rock the market, and in not always good ways, some good ways, some bad ways, are these new little beaded pearls. Okay. If I didn't know better, I'd say these are Akoya pearls. But I know better. Okay. And this picture looks like, okay, these are pretty decent sized pearls. You might think this is actually a pretty large one right at the top, right? Well, these are those pearls. Okay? This one at the bottom, 2.5 to 3 millimeter. Then we've got 3.5 to 4, 4.4 to 4.5, 4.5 to 5, and 5.5 to 5.5. So these are tiny, tiny pearls. Okay? They're tiny beaded pearls. Now, the issue, and I'm going to pass this around so you guys can see them up close and personal here in a moment, but the issue is they're freshwater pearls. Okay? What do they look like? So, this is a necklace Hisano had made for our wedding in Japan 12 years ago. And we had to work really closely with one of our vendors and good friends in Kobe to collect these pearls, to get all these different sizes lined up in the same quality and the same color, from about, what is it, love, 2.5, 2 millimeters thereabouts, all the way up to about the exact same size. Let's step in front of the camera here so people can see online. And then I'll also pass these around if you guys would like to see them. But as you can see, they look very, very, very similar. In fact, they almost look identical. Like if you wouldn't, the color's slightly off. But even in this freshwater set, it's got different colors. Akoya's finished piece. Freshwater's here, Akoya's here. And now, let's actually give them to you guys. You guys can pass it around the table so you can see it. It's something? All right. So why don't I pass these out? You guys can look at them if you wouldn't mind. The freshwater are on the ring, and this is Hisano's. So why has this caused a problem? Well, apart from the fact that it's a lot less expensive to grow freshwater pearls, it takes 6 months to a year to grow these beaded freshwater pearls. Typically, tissue graft freshwater pearls, you're talking 2, 3, 4 years. Okay, so this is much quicker. Crazy thing is they're much more expensive than the tissue grafts, at least in the fine quality, the super fine quality. They're asking prices that are pretty close to Akoya, a little bit less. And once all the farmers start producing these things, we're going to see things come down as Akoya prices are still growing. So, don't be fooled by the new Chinese Akoya. What's already happening? These are being sold as baby Akoyas, Chinese Akoyas. We're seeing them on the market. I was called by a dealer who I've known for a number of years. And he called me about a month and a half ago, if even that, and asked what my opinion was on this. Should we be selling these as like cultured, just mixing them with Japanese Akoyas, just calling the same thing? Like, well, no. They're a completely different pearl. They're not Akoya pearls. They're not saltwater pearls, and they are different. And the value is definitely different. And the only reason someone would be referring to these as baby Akoyas or Chinese Akoyas or cultured pearls, Chinese origin, would be to try to get one by buyers. Make the buyers believe and think that they're getting Akoya pearls when they're actually getting pearls. Oh. Here's some samples of it. Found online. Let's see. 4.5 to 5. Natural freshwater Akoya. I think we just learned from Douglas earlier that saltwater pearls can't grow in freshwater environments and vice versa, right? No such thing as a freshwater Akoya. Yeah.
But with the Akoya shells dying off, wouldn't this be important as a replacement for people that want to wear pearls?
People that want to wear pearls in this size, yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I think they're absolutely beautiful pearls, and I think you can make great jewelry out of them. I think it's probably the next big thing to come out of China. But it's definitely buyer beware. Yeah. Make sure you know what you're paying for, because lab-grown diamonds look very similar to natural diamonds. They look identical, and yet the value is definitely different. And the freshwater pearls are also more porous. They have a different color. They've gone through different processing. So, they're not going to wear the same way as Akoya pearls. And so, really, if you love Akoya pearls and you want Akoya pearls, you've got to make sure that you're buying Akoya pearls, especially in this size. And the shape has gotten so perfect. Not really here. You can see these shapes are a little bit off, because what I'm showing you there are some strands that Isano hand selected while we were there. She hand selected them to get them as perfect as possible. And there were hundreds, if not a couple thousand strands there. So the ones that she selected are really, really the creme de la creme. And those are the ones that are almost indistinguishable. I think, like Betty Sue had mentioned, you can see a bit of a difference in the color. But if you were to just see those pearls by themselves, your initial reaction is Akoya. And there we go, the baby freshwater Akoya pearls. And this is the description on the site. Natural white baby freshwater Akoya pearl necklace. It is freshwater Akoya pearls. This is one step away from just calling them Akoya pearls or baby Akoya pearls, which we're probably going to see happen here pretty soon. And it's really unfortunate, because the only reason for calling them this is really just to confuse people and to get more money. It's deception. It's just deception. No. So that is pretty much an overview of the top 4 types of pearls. And I say the top 4 types of pearls. Don't get me wrong. There's Kasumi, there's Cia Cortez, but the top 4 in the market that really make up the bulk of what we deal with in the market: the Southeast Tahitians, Akoyas, and freshwaters from China. And now I'm going to pivot just a little bit. So as Sarah mentioned, I'm the new president of the Cultured Pearl Association of America. Thank you. And everything is changing so rapidly and so dramatically in this industry. And not only is it changing in this industry, but there are more pearls than just your typical Akoya, your Tahitian, your freshwater. We've got the Kasumi pearls. We've also got natural pearls. There are pearls now being harvested in Bahrain, natural pearls. So natural pearls are making a comeback in the market. So one of the first things I decided I wanted to do as the president of the Cultured Pearl Association of America is shut it down. Not really shut it down, but we're making a pretty significant change. This is sort of behind the scenes right now. Not a lot of people know about it. But the Cultured Pearl Association of America, which was founded in 1957, was founded with one purpose. And we were founded because cultured pearls had just come into the market. All right? They had just started being brought in by the GIs after World War II, and most people didn't know what cultured pearls were. So there needed to be an organization that could introduce people to cultured pearls who were only familiar with natural pearls up until that point. And those cultured pearls from Japan, they were a little bit different than the natural pearls from the Middle East and Bahrain, etc. But they were also a beautiful new gem that Mikimoto really, leveled up by the French War, the World Fair in France the years prior, etc. And so there needed to be an organization in the United States that educated consumers about them, marketed them, and promoted them. Well, we've done that. That was almost 70 years ago, okay? 68 years ago. And now, all the pearls we see everywhere are cultured. And now what people aren't really familiar with are the natural pearls. It's kind of flipped on its head. Before, everybody knew what natural pearls were. Nobody knew what cultured pearls were. Now, all pearls are cultured for the most part, and nobody is really familiar with natural pearls. So we decided to change the name. We are becoming the Pearl Association. And so in the next few months, you're going to see the CPAA go through a bit of a change. We are working on a new logo. We're coming up with a new website, new charter for the organization, new bylaws for the organization, new mission statement for the organization. And shortly, you're going to start seeing natural pearls go into our marketing messages as well and into our design competitions as well. We decided to just kind of pull the entire pearl world together, sort of the pearls as one. I almost forgot. I should have shown this in the beginning. This is a perfect example of a pearls as one. This is one of Steve's pieces. If you don't know Steve, Steve Metzler, he's a longtime friend, pearl collector, part of Pearl Guide. You know who Steve is. You've seen his pieces. See one of these, you probably recognize from Pearl Guide right there. This piece is made with natural pearls from the Cook Islands, Pintada Maculata pearls, or the PP pearls, along with a single Australian perfect drop. And I think it's just such a perfect marriage of natural and cultured. And that's what we're going to do. Marry the two.
Yeah.
Any questions, or can we get started with the party?
Party!
All right. Thanks so much, guys. Thank you.